Hezbollah's Deputy Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem denounced that Israel intends to control the world through an expansionist project in the Middle East. The World Food Programme warned that Haiti faces one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the world, since 5.4 million citizens are in crisis and half of the population suffers from hunger. And the National Federation of Secondary Education Teachers in Uruguay has gone on a 48-hour strike to reject the government's education reform and budget cuts. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Hezbollah's Deputy Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qassem denounced that Israel intends to control the world through an expansionist project in the Middle East. During a speech, Naim Qassem assured that Hezbollah is still strong despite the attacks received by the Israeli regime. He also indicated that they are regaining their strength and rebuilding a new organizational structure. Qassem warned that Israel is betting on crime under the absolute protection of the United States and will take an official position on the matter. Hezbollah Deputy Secretary General affirmed that the resistance will attack the Israeli occupation army, its operation bases and barracks until a ceasefire is reached.
Israel is an expansionist occupation that is not satisfied with Palestine. It wants the whole Arab region. It wants the whole Islamic landscape. Rather, it wants to control the world based on its.
In addition, the Hezbollah's Deputy Secretary General assured that the United States is also responsible for the crimes orchestrated by Israel.
This means that the United States and Israel carry out together these acts of genocide and this ongoing crime in Palestine, Lebanon and the region, and the U.S. gives Israel free rein to do whatever it wants with all the military, political, media and international capabilities exercised by the United States. This means they are partners in what they want to achieve. We are facing a new threat in the Middle East, Israeli-U.S. style, at the hands of the Israeli criminal, the sponsorship of the Great Satan.
Meanwhile, in Lebanon, an airstrike by the Israeli regime killed 4 members of a family early on Tuesday morning in the south of the country. The attack was carried out in Harboua city in the Iqlim al-Tufa region against the victim's house in Al-Sharaik neighborhood. The Air Force of the Zionist occupation of Israel intensified its aggressive escalation in the south of the country, causing serious damage to the infrastructure, including the Al-Murtada hospital, which was put out of service. As Israel's aggressive escalation against the Palestinian people continues, the death toll has risen to more than 42,344 and some 99,013 people have been wounded. The figure was reached during the last 24 hours when the Israeli occupation forces carried out an attack where 55 Palestinians were killed and 329 wounded. Health authorities indicated that most of the victims were women and children. In addition, local media reported that the Israeli occupation forces continue to obstruct the movement of ambulances and civil defense teams, blocking the access of medical emergency services, which could cost the lives of the wounded. Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations Security Council, Vasily Nevencia, accused the West of double standards when it condemned the arrest of United Nations employees by the government of Yemen, while looking the other way about killings in Yemen, Gaza and Lebanon by the Israeli forces. The Russian representative pointed out that the West ignores the dozens of assassinations committed by Israel against United Nations employees in Gaza and the attacks against its officials in Lebanon. Nevencia recalled that the arrest of the United Nations representatives by the ruling Ansar Allah movement in Yemen were made on charges of involvement in acts of sabotage and espionage. In this regard, the Russian representative emphasized the need for the West to reject any act of similar nature against representatives of the United Nations, including the actions of Israel against officials in Gaza and Lebanon. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni condemned the Israeli attack against United Nations peacekeepers troops in Lebanon. During a Senate session, Meloni described the Israeli attack against the United Nations security mission as unjustified and pointed out that it represents a violation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. The attack took place on Sunday when Israeli tanks reportedly forced their way into one of the gates of the United Nations mission in southern Lebanon. The incursion happened after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the United Nations mission to evacuate its troops from the area. Prime Minister Meloni also informed about her plans to visit Lebanon, while Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani will travel to Israel and the Palestinian territories. On Tuesday, the United Nations warned that the conflict-ravaged Gaza is facing the worst restrictions on aid since the Israeli genocide began over a year ago, and its devastating impact on children. According to the spokesman for the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, James Elder, day after day, the situation for children becomes worse than the day before, as Israel has been intensifying its operations in the north of the besieged Palestinian territory, where hundreds of thousands of people are trapped. Despite a desperate need to increase the amount of aid going in, the aid access is worsening. Last week, there were several days when no commercial trucks of any kind were allowed to enter.
Day after day, the situation for children becomes worse than the day before. And that's going to continue so long as we see ongoing strikes and so long as we see now what is probably the worst restrictions we've seen on humanitarian aid. August was the lowest amount of humanitarian aid that came into the Gaza Strip of any full month since the war broke out, and over several days in the last week, no commercial trucks whatsoever were allowed to come in. So children now have multiple deprivations, having moved many times, now living in 85% of the Gaza Strip is now under some form of an evacuation order, so now living in conditions that are essentially unlivable.
In Spain, citizens mobilized to reject the genocide perpetrated by the Israeli regime in the Gaza Strip and to call for an immediate ceasefire in Palestine. Spanish social organizations gathered to demand a ceasefire and a long-term political solution to the Israeli war against Palestine. The gathering took place outside the European Union headquarters in Barcelona, where the demonstrators demanded Tel Aviv to take responsibility for its war crimes and crimes against humanity. Spanish citizens have repeatedly requested the government to put an end to the trade of weapons and military technology with the Israeli regime, as well as a rupture of diplomatic, institutional, economic, sporting and cultural relations with that country. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The World Food Programme warned that Haiti faces one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the world, since 5.4 million citizens are in crisis and half of the population suffers from hunger. According to a report of the United Nations program, at least 2 million Haitians are living in an emergency situation and another 6,000 in catastrophic levels of famine. The report detailed that the citizens in emergency situations suffer from extreme food shortages, severe malnutrition, and numerous diseases. Social organizations assure that $230 million are needed to implement assistance programs to support the citizens affected by armed violence until the end of the year. On the other hand, the generalized violence in Haiti has caused the displacement of more than 700,000 people, half of them children. Many of the citizens have been forced to move to shelters such as schools and public buildings in the capital city of Port-au-Prince. These shelters, due to the high population and poor sanitary conditions, are prone to the spread of diseases. At the Food and Agriculture Organization's Investment Forum 2024 held in Italy, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel asserted that the U.S. blockade affects the Caribbean islands' food security.
Agricultura y alimentación son términos inseparables y en el caso de Cuba resultan estratégicos.
Farmers and food are inseparable terms, and in the case of Cuba it is strategic for many reasons that do not end in a few lines. We live in a time marked by inequality and injustice in economic relations, where it is most cruelly expressed in the painful food shortages suffered by the largest majorities, including progress. In this vital area of this critical global picture, the states left all over the planet by the 2 years of pandemic, with its impact not yet overcome in the supply chain, the dramatic effects of climate change on food productions in Cuba's specific case, the long and deep political damage of the blockade, worsens the economy as a whole with an emphasis on the standard of living of the Cuban people.
In this context, President Díaz-Canel urged the international community to support Cuba and to consider it as a strategic partner for agricultural development and global food security.
I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this forum and invite you to consider Cuba as a strategic partner in a joint path towards agricultural development and food security.
In Venezuela, from the mountain barracks in Caracas, President Nicolás Maduro led the ceremony for the handover of the high command of the general commands of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces Aviation, Military, Presidential, Honor Guard and Intelligence Service. During the act of handover and acceptance of command of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, the Venezuelan head of state expressed that the country is on the right side of history, assuring that the country has the military power it needs for its defense. He also congratulated the National Armed Force for its work and results in the defense of the sovereignty of the Venezuelan territory. Moreover, President Maduro pointed out that in Venezuela there is absolute peace.
I want to welcome and convey to all the military family of Venezuela my recognition and my congratulations. We can say categorically, absolutely clearly, that Venezuela has a military power that defends it, that Venezuela has military men at the front of this beautiful battle of the 21st century for the powerful homeland. As Commander-in-Chief, with the example of our Commander Hugo Chavez, and the military glories of our history, I have studied humbly to fully serve my country. As Commander-in-Chief, and every day I learn something from you, cadets, soldiers, officers, superior general staff.
Members of the Colombian National Learning Service Union rallied Tuesday in Bogotá in support of President Gustavo Petro amid investigations by the National Electoral Council into the head of state campaign finances during the 2024 elections. The demonstrators denounced the highest electoral body's investigation as a coup attempt against the Colombian president. They also affirmed that the charges against the head of state are a violation of the country's constitution, since the electoral entity does not have the power to investigate the president. The demonstrators demanded that the will for change of the Colombian people be respected. The National Federation of Secondary Education Teachers in Uruguay has gone on a 48-hour strike to reject the government's education reform and budget cuts. As part of the mobilization, the union members occupied several learning centers in the Uruguayan capital, forcing them to suspend their classes. During the two-day strike, there will be mobilizations, internal assemblies, and meetings with parents and students. A march along the 18 de Julio Avenue is also expected on Wednesday morning.
Well, look, we have a very serious contradiction here. There is an ideological project, which means that the state is only responsible for the instruction or education of our young people up to the age of 15. Above that age, thinking about high school, it is the responsibility of the family or the people themselves who want to study if this withdrawal of the state is in line with the withdrawal of the state from other public policies, particularly from the social law. This year we have seen how the High School, an emblematic institution of the Uruguayan public culture, was dismantled. Today they are going to dismantle the Bausa High School, another emblematic institution here in this area of the capital. It is the logic of restricting the possibility, not only of exercising the right to education not only in relation to high school, but also of limiting access to higher education, particularly to the university.
At the moment, what we have is an active occupation, which means that the occupation is legal. The police came, but only to receive the complaint. There is no intervention order for now. We are only occupying the place. At the time they arrive, we will evaluate the situation, the attitude of the police, and then we will see how we vacate the center.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Russia warns of Western states' attempts to put pressure on Georgia's authorities and interfere in the election campaign as the October 26 parliamentary polls approach. Moscow said it has observed open attempts by Western countries led by the United States to exert pressure on the authorities of Georgia and directly influence the course of the election campaign. In this context, the Russian government has also been emphatic in stressing that it does not meddle in any way in the internal affairs of its neighbor nation. Western countries toughened their rhetoric against Georgia after it passed a law in May for authorities to protect the country from foreign interference. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff held an emergency meeting after reporting and condemning the destruction of connecting roads to the north. Although Pyongyang has not made any statement, it warned earlier that it would carry out this operation. The incident occurred after South Korean drones flew over the northern territory and dropped propaganda leaflets. In turn, the deputy director of the propaganda department of the DPRK Workers' Party, Kim Yo-jong, said that the overflight of drones in its airspace was equivalent to a declaration of war. The U.S. presence and its constant military exercises have led to increasing tensions in the area. In this context, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning warned of the intensification of tensions in Asia and urged all involved parties to resolve their conflicts through diplomacy. Furthermore, the official shared Beijing's concern about the welfare of the region as China reassured its commitment to maintaining peace and stability on the Korean peninsula.
We have noted the relevant situation. As a close neighbor of the peninsula, China is paying attention to the development of its situation and the dynamics of North Korea-South Korea relations. Tensions on the peninsula do not serve the common interests of all parties, and the priority is to avoid further escalation of conflicts. China's position on maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula and promoting a political solution to this issue remains unchanged. We also hope that all parties will make joint efforts toward this goal.
On Tuesday, heads of state and top diplomats from member countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization arrived in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, to attend the 23rd summit. Participants believe the two-day summit will achieve positive results and provide more impetus to the security, stability and development of regional countries. Since the establishment of the organization 23 years ago, its member states have always adhered to the Shanghai spirit, continuously enhanced good neighborhoodliness and deepened cooperation in various fields. In this context, the Chinese Premier Li Xian, who is currently on an official visit in Pakistan, will reportedly attend the council meeting where the international community expects the organization to shoulder greater responsibility and achieve more practical cooperation outcomes. Every October 15th, the world community comes together to celebrate International Rural Women's Day.
In recognition of rural women and girls' vital role in global food systems, this year's theme, Rural Women Sustaining Nature for Our Collective Future, Building Climate Resilience, Conserving Biodiversity, and Caring for Land towards Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women and Girls, highlights their contributions from crop production to food distribution despite facing systemic challenges like unequal power and higher food insecurity. Rural women account for about 22% of the global population. The International Day of Rural Women, first established by the General Assembly in its Resolution 62-136 of December 18, 2007, recognizes the critical role and contribution of rural women, including indigenous women, in enhancing agricultural and rural development, improving food security and eradicating rural poverty.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.